Welcome back. In the last video, we were printing out the student data, and student has name and age and language. For each data, we wrote separate functions. For student name, we write student name function, student age function for age, and student language functions. So wherever we need this data, we just call the functions and they did the print operation for us. It was great. And we asked the question, what if we need this data again? We call these three functions again, but it showed us another problem, code repetition, code duplication, because we repeat the same code here, as you see. So how do we solve this problem? We will create a wrapper function, another function. That function will call these three for us. Whenever we need these three functionality, we will call the wrapper function. So let's define that main function or wrapper function for these three. One function to call all three. I will define this function as def. Let us name this function as student data. Again, no parameters. Now it will call these three functions. I take these three functions, I copied them, and I will now paste it here, and I will modify the indent to make all these three inside my wrapper function. I indent them properly. So now if I run this, I have created a wrapper function, a main function for me. Now, whenever I need the student data, again and again, I will only call this student data function. As you see, it prints all the necessary data on the screen. I just call it again. As you see, one line of code, everything is done via separate functions. This is exactly what we use functions for. Okay, let's move on, and let's say we want to print student's name and surname, last name separately. Let's say we want to print as like this: name Peter, let's say Peter, and last name Parker, Peter Parker. Okay, and we will, in the previous name function, we were printing both name in only one field. Now I want to separate them, so I will create two different functions. Create two separate functions. The first one is I will define it as student first name. This is the first function. Again, no parameters. It will only print the name as Peter. This value here, it will print this. The second function is going to be def, is going to be student last name, and it's gonna print the last name as Parker. Okay, static functions, but we are trying to understand the underlying concept behind functions, so I keep them simple. We will define very complex functions in a very soon. So now we have two different functions, and now I want to print student's name, right? Now I will print student's name with these functions, So I want to call these two functions, but I don't want to call them one by one. So I will create a wrapper function, def, as student name. It will be student name. Actually, I redefined the student name function. It was defined earlier, but now I am overriding it. I am redefining it. Student name, it will call student first name here. Then it will call student last name. This function will only call these two, and they will do the print operations. So if you call student name, as you see, the first function will print name as Peter, the second function will print name as Parker. Great. So one last thing. Now in this function, in student data, let me fix this typo. First run this, then run this. Okay. Now, when you call this student data, it will call student name. Student name has two different functions in it. And let me show you. If I call this one more time for the last time, you see this time name and last name is in different lines, because when we call student data, it will call student name first, student name will call student first name, and it will print this. Student last name, it will print this, and I will now draw this on whiteboard. Here I will show you how the execution flows work in Python, and then we can write. So let's first draw this. Let's put this on this side and make this a little bit small. So I take my pen, and so let's start the first function, the wrapper function, as student data. I will draw it here, a student data function. It's here. Let me write the function name. It's student data function. Inside that function, we have three functions, as you see on the left: student name, student name function, student age function, student age, and student language function. We have three functions in the wrapper function. Okay, now student name function, let me move down. Student name function is this one, and it includes two other functions. So I will draw it here. Student name, this is student name function. Student name function. And there are two functions inside it. The first one is student first name. The second one is student last name. And the student first name is here. This is student first name. First name, and student last name is here. Student last name. So these are my functions, and I will show you the execution flow. First, Python interpreter will start to run the code from top to down. Okay, and when it sees this student name line, when it encounters this line, it's a function, execution flow will go to that function, and it will start to run this function. And inside that, it sees a function as student first name, then it goes to, from here, it goes to student first name, and start to execute it. It will only print. So as soon as it finishes, let me go back. As soon as this finishes, this will go, it comes here to the finishing point of this function. It will come here, and it will go down to student last name, then come to student last name. It will finish again. It will go back here to the end here. Then, since this function is finished executing, it will come here, and interpreter will move on to the second one. When it encounters student age, and let's draw it here also, let's say this is student age, and this is student language, student age, it will come and it will execute this. When it finished, this will go back to interpreter, it will come and it will execute the last function, which is the student language. When also this finish, finally they were all finished, and this will finish the execution of this student data function. This is called execution flow of this specific function. We draw the execution flow of Python interpreter. So on the left, let's write this and let's finish this topic. Here I will write as markdown execution flow, and we will see whatever we draw on the right, we will write them here. Python interpreter runs the code from the first line. That's the first line it runs is here. Okay, the first line. When it encounters a function and moves on, of course, and moves down. When it encounters, if it encounters a function, call, what happens? It goes to that function first and executes it. First, it goes into that function, executes it, waits it to finish, and returns back. Now, student name has finished, and now it goes down here. So after returning back, moves down, and this cycle goes on. Whenever it encounters a function, it goes and runs that function, and inside that function, if there is another function, it goes and runs that. So it waits until all the nested functions has finished execution. This is called execution flow. Okay, I think that's enough for defining functions. We now know how to define functions. We now know how to nest functions, call other functions, and now we will move on with our function definitions. We will create functions with parameters in the next video. Join me in the next video and see you there.